Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube Daily Double. Today we're learning Maseches Eiruvin, Perek Hey, Mishnah Zayin Ches. Mishnah Zayin says, Mishahaya b'Mizrach, he was in the east of the city, right? Normally, if you don't make an Eruv, you have 2,000 amos each side of your city. He was in the eastern part of the city. Amar Libno Ariv Liba Marav. Right, so he was outside at the beginning of Shabbos. He was outside the city limits, and he said, "Make an eruv to the Marav, to the west part of the city." He was in the eastern part of the city. He's in the west part of the city. Then Marav, or the opposite case, he's in the west. He says to his son, "Make an eruv in the Mizrach, seemingly 2,000 amos away from the city limits." So technically, there's a problem over here because if you're 1,000, we'll learn in the next Mishnah, if you're 1,000 amos away from the city in the east, you can't make an eruv to the west, right? Because you're not within your eruv. If you're in your city, so you have 2,000 amos, you have to be able to get to your eruv in order to be a valid eruv. If you can't get to your eruv, then you can't use the eruv. So if I make 2,000 amos away from my city, I'm in the city, so I'm 2,000 amos away from my eruv. I can get to my eruv. But here it's 3,000 amos away from him. So what do you do? So if he can get to his house, Ule Ruvo Yoser Mikan, and Eruv is 3,000 amos away. Mutter Lebeso Ashal Eruv, he can go to his house, but he can't go to his Eruv. Le Ruvo Al Payamama. However, let's say there's a certain instance, it would have to be a case where like a diagonal. We mentioned an Eruv is not like a circle, it's like a box. So it was obviously it's not going to be Mizrach and Marav over here, but let's say it's a place where it's north and south or something like that. So he has between him and his Eruv Alpayim, he can get to his Eruv. Well, Lebesa Yoser Mekan. However, to his house is more than 2,000 amos. Asher Lebesa or Mutra Le'eruvo. Even though normally, right, you're always allowed to go to your house. However, in this case, you can't go to your house because it's more than 2,000 amos away. Now, I believe the Gemara does say a little different over here. He says, and the Rabbi Bartanura brings it, he can't, it doesn't mean Asher Lebesa, he could go to his house. He just can't count from his house 2,000 amos. Since he would 2,000 amos of his Eruv, he can use the Eruv. I'm not sure. The Gemara says, we'll go with the Gemara says. Also, the base means he can go to his house. You always go to your house because if you're within 2,000 amos of the city, you can always get to your house. You just can't count from your house further. Hanosin is a ruvo, meaning at all, you can't use it, right? Hanosin is a ruvo be bura shalir. Let's say he puts the Eruv in the Ibura Shalir. Ibura Shalir, we said, is the Karfif, the 70 and 2/3 amos outside the city limits. Loss of Alochel, that's really part of the city limits, not even outside the city limits. You don't get any more space. The Gemara explains, doesn't mean he puts it outside the 2,000 amos. He puts it outside the city limits. So let's say he puts it out 5 amos to the east, so he can only go, right? So now he can go 2,005 amos to the east, but he can only go 1,995 amos to the west. What he gets to one side, he loses the other side, which I think is obvious already. Hilchos Eiruvin Tchumen, if we're familiar with Eiruvin Tchumen already. Let's say you have two cities. They're within, right? There's a space between them, and the space between them is less than 2,000 amos. So you live in the big city, the urban city, New York City, right? You can go, of course, within 2,000 amos to the smaller city on Shabbos. And you also, since the smaller city is considered subsidiary to the bigger city, you can go outside the city limits of the small city, even 2,000 amos. However, if you live in the suburb, you live in Nassau County, in the 5 towns, so you can walk to the other city, but you can't walk outside the other city 2,000 amos. You can walk to the other city because it's within 2,000 amos, but you can't, since you're a subsidiary, we'll explain this more in Yom, so you can't walk outside the city 2,000 amos. Ketzad. Now, this Ketzad is not an explanation on the first statement. There's missing part of it. The Gemara fills in part of what's going here. Even though we said before, if you're in the small city and you want to go to the big city, you can't walk outside the big city 2,000 amos. If you put an Eruv, if you live in the small city, you put an Eruv in the big city, so then you could walk to those amos. Similarly, if put your Eruv, if you live in the big city, you put your Eruv in the small city. You don't have to put your Eruv there, but if you did, you could also walk 2,000 amos outside the small city. Rakiva Omer Ein Lo Ela B'Makom Eruvo Al Payim. Rakiva says it doesn't help if you're in a small city and you put your Eruv in the big city, it doesn't help you to be able to be Kona Shvisa in the big city and to walk outside the big city to Amos. We don't hold like Rabbi Kiva, we hold it does work. We'll talk more about this Mishnah Ches, Iyam Mitzion, coming up next.